So let's check with Ronan in Vermont, who talked to a Christian about proof of God, and the person mentioned biblical prophecy. And so you're on with Matt and Tracy. What do you got?
Hi, it's really awesome to be on and talking to you guys.
Well, it's awesome to have
really
you.
Cool.
Thank you.
So yeah, I was downtown getting coffee today, and as I left and started heading home, these three people on the street stopped me, and one of them was like, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Like, I just want to first off ask if you're like believer or non-believer, whatever. And so I told them I'm an atheist. So we basically does like a Bible study, and he wants to prove that the Bible is true. And so we went to a coffee shop and talked about it. Mm-hmm. And so we brought up some really weird things. Like, I was trying to get him away from being like super preaching the gospel, which I don't think he wanted to do, but it was kind of like definitely going there. I don't need that. And he brought up some like stuff. He brought up a lot of stuff about like there are prophecies in the Bible that get fulfilled.
Sure.
And that's how I know, and that's why I believe.
Sure, okay.
It was kind of like...
I often say that biblical prophecy is like the weakest of apologetics possible.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. Because it was like, how do you get to this? And he's like, I believe in the Bible because the Bible is true and the Bible says it's true. And I'm like, right, but how do you know that the Bible is true?
Right, and he's saying because it makes these weird predictions and only, I guess only a God would know or something. So here's the first problem. The first problem is, even if it did make weird predictions that happened that were like, incredibly impressive, you still wouldn't know how the mechanism worked until you could demonstrate that, right? So even if you were doing it, the idea that this is a message from a God has not been demonstrated through that. It's, clearly there's something going on, but what? But here's the problem.
If that happens.
When they lay a prophecy on you, the best thing to do, because there are so many different things that people call prophecy, so the best thing to do is to say, lay your best prophecy, your most impressive prophecy on me. Let them lay their...
If you laid a few on, I'm eager to talk about those.
You don't even need to talk about them. Go to Google them, right? Like, go to Wikipedia and look up those Bible books.
Google them and, like...
Yeah.
I like a quick Google search was like a lot of like answers in Genesis and like JW.
Right. So if you go to Wikipedia and you look up that book of the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. It'll have an explanation of the book, of its history, of and almost. First of all, if the prophecy is clear, right? So let's say that there are some that seem pretty clear, right? Some of them are very vague and interpretive, but some are very clear. And when you look at the ones that are most clear, in my experience, when you go to Wikipedia and you just look at the history and the background of the text, what you'll find is that the text that is the most impressive has been altered at a later date after the events. And all you have to... So I would say the best response for you would be to go to Wikipedia and just look up that Bible book, and then look up just sort of read up on the history of that book. When was it written? When were the alterations made? How many authors did it have? Which books did he pull? Or which book did he...
That's a really good point. He did one about Book of Job. He did one.
Job is really weird that he picked that, because Job is like
you want to know what he said about Job?
Job is like a
it wasn't quite prophecy there. He was talking about the Book of Job proves the water cycle. And then he shows me the quote, and it's like...
Is he saying that it describes, like, evaporation and condensation? I mean...
So what Job says in the book
precipitation.
Is, like, God draws the water up from the streams and the rivers, and then the water pours forth from the clouds as rain.
Which is something that we all understand.
That's something you can observe. And I was like, no, that's not... I was trying to be really patient, but I'm like... that is something that a child can observe.
Yeah, it's like saying it explains, the whole concept of biological conception by saying that if you put a male goat in a stock pen full of females, a lot of them end up pregnant. How could the Bible know this, right?
You get baby goats.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is really useful? He went into, I don't know what book it was from, but he mentioned that the Bible prophesized King Cyrus and the fall of Babylon.
Yeah, let's find
And I don't know anything about Babylon.
Yeah, did he give you a book?
But it was like, I don't know which book it was, but it was something. It was like, it mentioned Cyrus by name, therefore Bible true, therefore God.
Sure, that's what he's going to try to say, but it doesn't get you to God. Yeah. It gets you, even if it were true, it gets you to a weird prophecy. But let's see, the fall of Babylon is written where?
And now that you've made that point, the fact that it mentions Cyrus by name, if Cyrus was a historical figure, that was probably inserted after the fact.
If you can find the book, and which I'm trying to help you out with here right now, book of Isaiah and the book of Daniel both mention it. I'm going to say I'd probably go with Isaiah.
Ezra too.
Yeah,
was Ezra with Nebuchadnezzar, because he mentioned Nebuchadnezzar too.
So getting back to the water cycle, because I just checked, the first scientific description of the water cycle was around 1500 CE, but there's an acknowledgement that Hebrew scholars had some understanding of the water cycle back when...
Yeah, but a child has understanding of the water cycle.
No, don't do that. A child now has an understanding of water cycle
true.
Because they're raised in a society that has that understanding. And so we inadvertently make inferences from what people around us appear to know and everything else, even before we're strictly thought. At some point, people did not understand the water cycle. And the observation that led to that was that the rivers flow down to the sea, and yet the sea never seems to get any more full. And so the natural conclusion is then that water must go somewhere. And because water also falls from clouds, then the natural inference is that, well, somehow or another the water gets up to the clouds. The thing that the Hebrew Bible and Job gets wrong is that there's no evidence that God maketh the drops to go up to the clouds. The evidence is that this is what happens, and we may not know why.
Right.
And then, of course, we learn about evaporation by having a kiddie pool in the backyard that we have to
you can see evaporation even on, like, you spill a drink and it dries up.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
it went away.
I mentioned that to him. I was like, well, it doesn't even say the sun in that verse. It says God. And if one person says God made the water dry up and another says that the sun made the water dry up, then who's right?
Oh, the sun is God. But it doesn't matter. God made the sun, and it's the sun's job. It was God's intent to have a water cycle. That's the thing. When people think they find something amazing, scientific within a book, they're also cherry picking because, bats aren't birds, and, go through all the list of other things. You're not going to genetically change sheep by smacking them with reeds in order to create spotted sheep and other stuff like that. So they're throwing out all the things that got wrong and then looking at something got right. Nobody does this more often than Muslims with regard to the Quran, talking about things like, it describes a fetus as looking like chewed gum kind of thing. And you know why that happened? Because people had miscarriages, and because people lived on farms where animals were constantly getting pregnant and having miscarriages, or somebody cracked open an egg and it had a fetus in it of various types. This knowledge has been around, just not formulated and put together into a scientific theory where we're supported with a bunch of evidence. But it's only city folk who seem to think that nobody who was in a 8th century or BC farm could have possibly understood anything about a fetus. I mean, that's just bizarre.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
They didn't understand genetics.
You understand if you birth animals for a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's modern city folk who are like, wow, it's amazing these people understood that. No, it's shocking that you didn't.
So what I'm getting is go to Wikipedia and find out when certain information or names were edited into
it doesn't
the Bible that we get.
Let's go to any attempt for an actual piece of prophecy. I'm going to tell you something. In my show, And I'll be doing this, by the way, anybody who's interested in taking a cruise to Havana, Cuba, and the Bahamas with me giving my Magic and Skepticism show / lecture, you can just Google Free Thought Cruise, and you will find it. I don't have the actual links here. I know we're doing well, but if you want to get in before the sales close, the cruise is the weekend of March 22nd, I believe. But just Google Free Thought Cruise, look for the one with the picture of me, and you'll find the right cruise. In the show, and hopefully the people who come to the show won't go, oh, I knew this was going to happen. I have a cardboard box out on a table before the show. And there's an instruction for people before the show to come up and write down their favorite book title or movie title or something like that and drop it in the box. The box is down there at the audience. Later on in the show, I'll bring Alex out on stage. A member of the audience will pick up the box, open the box themselves, pull out one of those pieces of paper, read what it says, and then Alex will read their mind and tell them what's on that piece of paper. Now, that's a fucking miracle. Because at no point do we go near the box. There's no opportunity for any sort of skullduggery or anything else. The box is there in the audience. Somebody opens it, looks inside, pulls out the slip, and she can read their mind. Now, are we going to get it right every time? I'm not going to tell you. But if we get it right, you have no explanation for it. And so when we read something that somebody wrote down, some unknown person, countless centuries ago, they wrote something down, and it appears that maybe with the correct interpretation, it can almost look like they were predicting the future. Even if we were convinced that they nailed it word for word exactly, we don't know how they were able to do that. Did they get lucky? Was it a magic trick? Was it something that was inevitably going to happen? Was it something that was likely going to happen? Is it prophecy when I order a steak medium rare and I get a medium rare steak? Is that guy fulfilling prophecy? Are there people actively working to make this thing happen? You know, it prophesies the state of Israel. Yes, and there were people actively working to make that prophecy come true. I've talked about this before, where, you know, if I prophesied that in the future kids were going to be named Matt is Awesome or whatever it was I picked, somebody out there is going to do that. And don't, by the way. That's a terrible name for a kid.
Are you sure? Maybe I'll name my dog that, and we
name your dog
call
that.
It a stretch.
That's perfect. You know, I don't think the dog's going to get upset about what you call it as long as you rub its belly and let it try to stick its tongue in your mouth, which is what all dogs want to do. In order for prophecy to be useful at all, it needs to be specific. It needs to be answerable by only a single set of circumstances, not open to interpretation at all. And even if we, and there's several other criteria, even if we got through all of those, that doesn't tell us why we have a successfully fulfilled prophecy. Was it God? Was it aliens?
Doesn't bring us to God.
Yeah. Was it God? Was it aliens? Was it a time machine?
Was it a prediction?
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, there's a Super Bowl tonight, right? And if I say, oh my God, the Patriots are just going to take this thing, and that is not,
and I say the other team is going to win.
Right. But I mean, one of us is going to be right, you know?
Right.
And so then you have to kind of look at it. Like, for example, Jesus predicting that the temple was going to be destroyed, you know, that wouldn't have been like particularly hard to foresee as things were getting worse between the Jews and Rome Rome had all the power, right?
By the way,
idea that this city is going to get trampled was, you know, something that somebody probably could have just said, this is a coming.
Anybody who's impressed by prophecy should go watch Darren Brown's special, The System.
Okay.
Because it's a really good example of you don't have enough information to reach a conclusion, and yet, I'll describe it briefly. It picks a person out and starts giving them which dogs are going to win the race at the dog track. And of course, and they do this, by the way, this is a scam that's often done with stock picks. So somebody will say, hey, this stock's going to go do a big jump tomorrow. And they'll send you the first couple tips for free. And then you get to go check them. And you say, wow, they got the first one right and the second one right. So I'll take a risk on the third one with maybe just a little bit of money. And you get that right. And then you get a fourth one right. Then you get a fifth one right. And then you get a sixth one right. And at that point, you, based on all the information you have, are convinced that this person is able to tell you what's going to happen with, so far, 100% reliability. And you are willing to wager more and more money, either at the dog track or on stocks. And the truth is, the way that, and this is an old scam, so I'm not ruining Darren's thing so much. If I send out 500 predictions And then I take the half that got those first ones right. Now I have 250 where I've got one. Give them a new set of predictions. And then half of that group is going to now have 2 right. Then half of that group's going to have 3 right. Then half that group's going to have 4 right. And then you get down to the one person who has had 5 or 6 in a row. You can do it. And I've done this, or wanted to do this, but in a large show. Have everybody stand up and flip a coin. You get an audience of 1,000 people. Everybody flips a coin. Have everybody who flipped tails sit down. Then have the remaining standing people flip again. And then have everybody who flipped tails sit down. And you'll keep going. And eventually there'll be one person standing in the middle of the room that has flipped heads 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in a row. And because you're in this audience and everybody knows what's going on, it doesn't have the same impact as if you were sitting at home and flipped that coin and it landed 7, 8, 9 times in a row heads. That's the way you teach the lesson. That's the way you expose the fact that when you're working with a limited set of information, you are more likely to reach an incorrect conclusion. Magic for the win.
Yeah, I would advise you to go look at Book of Isaiah in Wikipedia, and especially the summary and the authorship section, which talk extensively about the edits to the book and the different periods in which different parts of it were written and the reasons for the understanding that there was different authors involved. And I mean, these books are not... They're just not what they're cracked up to be. It's not like some guy wrote it and it's all cut and dry. And he wrote it 100 years before the event, and then the event happened, and it was really amazing. I mean, basically, you're looking at books that other people have inserted stuff into, and parts of it are older than other parts. Then we're putting these fragments together, and this one text that we found has this section that wasn't in an older section, and so I mean, the prophecy is not great. So there's all kinds of things that can be wrong with it. Number one, you have the problem of retrofitting prophecy. So somebody prophesies a thing, and then later someone knows that was prophesied and they make it come true, right? Like the rise of Israel. When you support that as a Christian and you believe that that's prophecy, you're literally working to make a prophecy come true, right? Like you're like forcing that prophecy. So you're just making it happen and saying it was a prophecy. And then later...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but then you have other situations, like I said, where you might see something coming, like in the next 10 years or so, that it's like getting worse and like global warming is not a prophecy, right? It's a prediction based on trends and people saying, if we don't change some things, this is what we predict is going to happen. And if that happens, it's not a prophecy, right? It's like somebody looking at the data and the information and saying, this is what it looks like to me will happen. Now, could we all step up and change things and we turn it around? Sure. But if we don't and it happens, that's not prophetic.
By the way, anytime any Christian comes at me with a claim of prophecy and they don't start with prophecies about Jesus, I know that on some level they already understand what the problem is, because that would be the only prophecies that matter, and yet they have to deal with this. They have to deal with this funny little problem that, hey, here's all these prophecies that Jesus fulfilled, and yet all those prophecies are Jewish prophecies, and the Jews don't think Jesus fulfilled them.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. After the weird thing with Job, you started with the whole Jesus fulfilling a prophecy in the Old Testament of the blind will see and the lame will walk and blah, blah, blah. And it's like...
I did that too.
Yeah, the inference, the thing to go with is not, oh, it says Jesus did this, therefore Jesus did this and fulfilled the prophecy. It's the people writing the Bible.
It's in the book of Eric.
Apparently Jesus...
And the book of Eric over there actually has a passage that talks about when I healed the blind and the deaf and I did all that.
And it's like the people who wrote the New Testament obviously read the Old Testament and just went back into and found some stuff to pull and make look amazing. And
right, because like what Matt is saying,
really
if you go back and look at how Jewish scholars interpret the books, it has nothing to do with any kind of like Jesus as Messiah. Jesus does not fit the messianic.
They were expecting a warrior king.
Yeah, so and the Christians just say, oh, they were wrong. the people that wrote the books were wrong. So all right,
probably look into the Jewish interpretation, yeah.
Oh yeah, you really want to look at that because that'll make your head spin when it comes to.
And then when you get done with that, you can go to the Jews for Jesus, because not all Jews agree.
There's a really good Lewis Black skit on people, Christians telling the Jews what their holy books mean.
Yes.
It's really good. And he says
We should call it
our book.
Yeah.
We should call it Christian splaining.
Yeah. Basically them telling the Jews, like, no, you don't understand your own,
Because that's what Mormons are doing.
texts.
The Mormons,
I saw
the Latter-day Revelation of Jesus
that.
Christ, they're basically telling Christians that they didn't understand their own Bible.
You don't get it either.
Yeah, Mr. Atheist
Nobody
was talking
gets
about
it.
that the Mormons disproved everything for him.
Yep. And then Scientologists threw it all away.
My goodness. All right, Ronan, we're going to let you go. We got some other people waiting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure,
Get
thank
to your
you.
Atheist callers. Those are my favorite, too.
Okay, well, thanks.